You take mushrooms, same thing happens. Same signature arises, same center back here shuts down. Ayahuasca, recent stuff, same thing. You can shut down with ayahuasca as well. So we have a good read now on exactly how to control the no thought period. Where it happens in the brain, is what the signature looks like, and how it functions that way.
So I can feel maybe almost like the idea that, hey, but that's cheating, taking mushrooms or ayahuasca, and it's short-lived and so forth. But to return to what you were saying before, what I think is remarkable and precious about the psychedelic experience right now is that it makes evident that this state is possible. Once this state is viewed as being possible, and it is comprehended as such a state, which is a very big caveat and proviso, then the energetic obligation, the work, the discipline, the practice, the inquiry, in order to try to experience the persistent abiding of that state will be done. But as long as it remains a kind of theoretical fiction that seems to be a consequence of neuroscience, then it remains like Thomas More's utopia, no place. It doesn't actually exist. It's El Dorado. And it's this space of ineffability associated with this experience of no thought that I think encourages people to think that it doesn't exist at all. But everyone is constantly has that space available to themselves. Like, so, for example, I had the good luck to go out to Muir Woods just yesterday with a friend. And it's true that it's difficult to experience no thoughts when you're just constantly refreshing your email updates, right? There's probably a study on that, right? But it's really very interesting when we start now that we can start to open up the possibility of there being a kind of comparative ecology of stillness. Like, where is stillness more or less possible? Of course, it's possible anywhere. Right? It's possible in a meeting in a boardroom for a major corporation. But what was interesting about the experience of going out to Muir Woods is you can observe people walking around basically shocking themselves over and over in order to avoid the experience of the trees. They're doing it with like selfie stick, and they're doing it by blabbing on about like the Pittsburgh Steelers or something, like in the presence of this 1,500-year-old tree that really is not interested, right? And for whom the Steelers don't even appear on one of its rings, right? So what's interesting is that we can begin to gather a suite of techniques, which include psychedelics, but a suite of techniques in order to first convince ourselves that this state is so, right? That it's not just, an area. Like, I didn't believe it. When I first met Gary, I had a big opening under the experience of ayahuasca, and I had experienced no thought, but I didn't know what it was. And not knowing what it was, I didn't really know what kinds of practices in order to engage in order to revisit that state, and besides going and drinking ayahuasca again. And then you begin to think that it is the ayahuasca that is causing the state. When in fact, what the ayahuasca is doing, among other things that we can talk about, but one of the things that it's doing is simply blocking that activity of internal self-flagellation. And the practical experience of stillness seems to induce in the brain, what Gary was describing, this desire to return to this state. But it seems first and foremost necessary to experience the stillness. And it's so amazing, and I'm not, honestly, being judgmental about people walking around the redwoods snapping photos and taking selfie sticks. But the juxtaposition is striking because it means that that internal self-flagellation is so powerful that even when it's right next to something that, in my experience, crowds out any really self-referential thought, right? Like if you're asking, when am I, next to a redwood, it's just a preposterous question, right? Because the scale of time involved in that ongoing living system, which, by the way, probably most of you maybe know this, that has figured out immortality technology. Don't tell transhumanists over in Silicon Valley. But that, when the redwood eventually decides it's going to fall over and begin to eventually become compost, it creates buds that generate genetic clones of the other plant, launching the same life cycle back into the sky over and over and over again. The only thing it didn't count on, of course, was the existence of us and saws and things like that. But it's a remarkable experience to feel the way in which a proper exposure to nature can actually crowd out for a little while that ongoing chattering monkey. And the proof of it is what people will do to avoid it, which is, get a better camera, get a bigger lens, continual chatter with the photos and so forth. But it's something that, you all are blessed with, that you have a kind of the experience of natural beauty available to you, whereby you can ask yourself, you can engage in this inquiry and say, does this really exist? Does this state of stillness actually exist? Or is it just some concept that somebody's trying to sell because it's a concept that might sell? And I think as soon as we're convinced to actually engage in the inquiry of whether or not it exists, then we already begin to feel the obvious answer that of course it does. But it's in not experiencing that beginning, that actual experiential certitude, that it's possible to hack your own brain back into stillness. And it's easier than dealing with the Windows update, in some sense it is. I mean, it's an iterative process. You can do it every day as an emotion is emerging. So this morning I attempted to drive from Berkeley over to San Francisco, which I hadn't lived here. I'd lived here from 87 to 93, and I forgot. It's funny how the brain edits that out. Don't do that. But so I'd already forgotten, and it was really actually an amazing experience of stillness, but probably because I had had the experience of the redwoods yesterday, but to notice, that, oh, look, now this car is cutting me off and practically parallel to me. What an interesting geometrical formation that was as I hit the brakes. And what's interesting about it is that as an emotion comes up, any emotion, as Gary was saying, I like to start with positive ones, right? So, and really looking for where that I is, that it's experiencing that frothy cappuccino, right? Who's drinking this? And you can look and try to find the person who's experiencing the frothy cappuccino. And you have to practice that because it's much quicker off the block. It's much more difficult to get in behind and saying, I can't believe that person just cut me off. And the middle finger goes up, and then the other middle finger goes up, and so forth. But if you practice experiencing the fact that there isn't anybody there experiencing any of this, then it really becomes a miraculous dance of one adventure after another, that even an hour-and-a-half traffic snarl going across the Bay Bridge, getting the right to pay $5 in order to be in the traffic snarl, becomes some kind of weird and beautiful internal combustion engine symphony, which doesn't mean, you think that should go on forever. Right? It just means that the useless emotional attachment to it not being so doesn't cause this internal self-flagellation over and over and over again. So, I think that like the first axiom that maybe could kind of bubble up out of this dialogue is really ask yourself, is this so? Does this space of stillness possibly exist? And if it does, then it feels like the process of querying whether or not there is any I to all this blah, 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 begins to unfold. I mean, is that your experience in working with people?
Well, we're terrified of, oh my God, stillness. And yet every night we can't wait to get to sleep, to shut up the blah, blah. And sometime in the course of the night you spend hours without thought. So it's not something that's so strange to you. I mean, first thing in the morning, if you watch very carefully when you wake up, you'll see as you start to come up into the day, and before you crank up online, you'll see a window there. You get a little space. And you can watch, with Miles Davis and jazz, it's all about the spaces. You watch the music only works because there's spaces around the music. We get terrified of this thing, and yet we cultivate it. We can't wait to get to sleep to shut the damn thing up. Two other things, just quick things, would be, turns out that my experience is that working with lots of people, I encourage them to do psychedelics. And I'm a virgin. I got to experience another way. But if you don't have an idea, if the brain doesn't understand what it's possible to create, that there is an alternate reality different from the one that they're used to seeing, the consensus reality, then the brain says, I didn't realize I could do that. That can make such a huge difference. I work with a fellow here in the Bay Area, and he'd been practicing for a long time, Vipassana meditation, practice, and he wasn't getting anywhere. I said, take some mushrooms. Yeah. And so what happened was, the magically manifested. He took some mushrooms. Bang! It was like, oh, that's what I'm trying to do. And the brain got it then. The brain understands what's possible. The brain makes this thing up. It now knows what's possible. And when you know it's possible, you can go after it. So we encourage it. And it's the other thing, I'm not selling anything here. My stuff's all free. So I'm not trying to benefit myself out of this at all. Like it, don't like it, I don't care. But it's possible that you can do this thing. And you can do it in a lot less than 20,000 hours, 10,000 hours. You can do it if you do some mushrooms, some ayahuasca, whatever your pleasure is. Turns out a lot isn't better. I was down in Yucatan 12 at some billionaire invited me down. And he says, some of us, 6 service. And this one fellow had taken 2,000 hits of high-strength acid.
Not all at once.
Not all at once.
Yeah, okay. It just seemed like that.
There was some time.
Okay.
Taking 2,000 hits. And you said, well, are you done? He said, no, I'm not done yet. So it would be accomplished ego death, which was his goal. He wanted to just kill his ego. So well, after 2,000 hits, if you haven't accomplished it, don't you think it's probably not going to work? But what happened was he had now become an extreme athlete on acid. He was like Mr. Acid. He had books, videos, talk shows, you name it, because that was his identity. And he, instead of getting rid of his ego, he now had a mega ego. He had a monster ego attached to how, his great achievements.
Acid man.
Acid man. Acid man. So just to clarify, psychedelics definitely, probably absolutely necessary for most people to get to this place, just so you show what your brain can do. So I'm all for that. And you can do this. We got free books, free videos, free blog posts, interviews. This is doable. And I'm not, again, there's nothing money changing hands here.
Yeah, again, I think the line I would close with before we go to questions is a favorite line I have from one of the Kabirs, a Bhakti poet, Kabir, who said, "Nobody understands me, it's too simple." and I really think, speaking from my own experience, that I really wanted, whatever it is I was looking for to be complicated, and I wanted it to be, I wanted it to have levels. I wanted it hopefully to come from some, really incredibly cool other tradition. And when I gradually came into the awareness that in fact it was a simple practice of inquiring what the nature of the self was. And by simple, I don't mean that it's achieved all at once, but simple being non-complex, can be iterated over time on a day-to-day basis. At first, my mind was like recoiled at this idea. It can't possibly understand the immense complexity of myself through this simple process. But it's a very simple unwinding process, and once you get a little bit of taste of that stillness, you want to visit again, and you no longer care that it's not complicated. So, unless you have something you want to
Just
add.
one last. And don't think nothing happens until 10,000 hours. I was working with a doc at Harvard's Brigham and Women's Hospital. She's a oncologist, gynecological oncologist. And we started working together and just Skype back and forth a couple times. And I got her to do basically what we're talking about. You know, when you walk around on your rounds, just ask yourself, where am I or when am I? And she said, like after 6 weeks, she said, it's amazing. I do my rounds now, and it's different. The interns, they like me. The patients respond better. My coworkers aren't quite as vicious as they usually are, the sharks that they are. My days go by so much more easily. She hadn't stopped her thoughts. She hadn't completely wiped out her I, but she had begun to question the integrity. What was this I thing, and how important was it, and should I give it complete control, CEO-ship of my entire existence? Or do I just want to recognize it's maybe a useful functionality, should be on the desktop someplace, but doesn't have to be the main OS. It can be sitting off to the side somewhere. This can happen very quickly. It can get very useful and productive very quickly.
So, questions?
If anyone has any questions, I have a microphone right here, so hold on.
Yes, sir.
Come up to the microphone. Oh, there's the microphone. Okay, is anyone working on getting a pill through the USDA to do this? And also, you have electronic technology, these headsets you can wear for virtual reality. So is there anything along that line, those two lines, for achieving this stillness?
Yeah, the headnet stuff is on its way. It's close. I mean, the Yale work was in fMRI. It's $1 million a Tesla. The average rig is 3 Tesla. It's $3 million. It's not going to be in our basements. And so the idea was the very cheap way to do this thing is you can put these transducers on the outside of your head. What you're talking about with the Muse headset, there's 2 or 3 other ones on the market right now. They may have 6, 8, 10 transducers. They're just kind of lined up down here. They fit over here someplace. That'll give you an idea what the general EEG, what the general brain signature is. What we're trying to do is go after the key centers and watch them operate in real time. If you can lay in or sit in your chair with a USB pluggable headset and watch your brain go in and out of selfing, we proved it in Yale, very quickly you can train yourself exactly how to stop this thing. And so what the question is now is, can we take, this is 128 right now, transducers. We've got it down to 64. They've got it now down to 40. And so the price keeps coming down as you get to fewer and fewer transducers. Signal processing is easier. It's a lot cheaper to make a head cap, it's like a swimming cap with the transducers in it. It's going to be, we hope, someplace less than $200 or $300. Not surprisingly, the DoD's throwing a lot of money at this thing because it's worried about PTSD. And they believe they can get good PSD results out of this as well. So these are coming. The ones that are out right now can't do it because they're on the surface. They're just getting signatures out here. But there's a group in Palo Alto that's working right now on getting a very inexpensive, much more inexpensive EEG sitting outside of your skull that you can USB plug or maybe wireless. So yeah, this stuff is close, a year or two. The ones that are out now are interesting, but they're not just going to give you a broad signature, whether you're happy or sad, but it won't give you any direct feedback on the real centers that are in your brain that are making this narrative. But it's not far away. The pill, you got a pill. I mean, it's a little mushroom. The pill already exists.
It's not USDA.
No, I know it's not. I know it's not. Maybe the check's in the mail on that.
Well, the other thing to add on that is that you were born with a headset right between your shoulders, and it has the built-in capacity to do this. And what's amazing is because we've lived in this cultural moment where we're trained only to be able to inquire into the external world, that we look for something in the external world and be able to help us do that. But we can engage in introspection, and we can watch our own thoughts. We don't need a gizmo to tell us if we're happy or we're sad. So I'm a little bit more of a skeptic actually about the technologization of this, because I think it gives it yet another opportunity to avoid what has to be an inside job. Now, I know that your question was really about to experience the stillness, but I really do think that Gary is right that mushrooms already exist. They've been field tested for millennia. And Johns Hopkins and a couple of other universities have done some really good pilot studies. What remains is to really look and see what the screening procedures places like Johns Hopkins and NYU have used, and then not wait for the experts. Because the experts are engaged in a very slow process of engaging in the careful analysis of data that is compromised by the fact that they're not experiencing it. And this is all about who's experiencing it, and that's you.
And the mushrooms are closer, I think, than you might believe. They've been running experiments at Hopkins now for 10 years, publishing lots and lots of papers, high-level peer-reviewed journals. Roland Griffiths, who runs the program at Hopkins, they got it permitted. They were the first ones to get the ability to use psilocybin in the United States, and they got it for cancer pain remediation. And once they got it in, started running the tests, and they could have it protected so it wouldn't get stolen, God forbid. But they put out some really good data. 2 years ago, he spoke up at San Rafael at the same conference I'm speaking at tomorrow, and he talked about this, exactly where they were. And right now, they've got mushrooms plus or minus meditation, trials happening as it is. Mushroom plus or minus meditation, so you can break those things apart. And I think that's going to be really important. So there are many, many places working on mushrooms right now. There's a lot of work going on in the UK on IV psilocybin. And really, again, top-notch research. So there's a lot of work going in mushrooms. They're more likely to get permitted, I think, before almost anything else you can think of, because there's so much good work already laid down.
I have a quick question back here real quick. You mentioned earlier you were talking about self-referential experiences, like sort of a uniquely human quality or trait, and you were talking about organizing and sort of letting people know about their, our ability to let people know and sort of maneuver in our environment is a quality that's uniquely human. I wonder what you think about like bee and ant hive mentality, where there's sort of this group organization and sort of like this communication to find resources, and even self-referential experiences of animals that have been known to eat psychedelics or other types of plant mushrooms. The reindeer eat Amanita muscaria. They found that jaguars are actually interested in ayahuasca kapi vines.
That's how we learned about it.
Yeah.
Right, so watching animals, right. So what can we say with these? I mean, is this an example of possibly an experience of consciousness in these animals that we can...
I mean, there's some fascinating videos you can stream on Netflix on huge crowds of animals of all kinds, birds, turtles, ants, bees. But that's if you study those very carefully, it's really they're only relating to the one next to them. If you watch the birds fly, these enormous clusters of birds sweeping back and forth, if you watch all they follow this. All they do is watch the ones next to them. There is no overlord who decides which way we're going to go right now. It's really kind of a group consensus. If you even watch some of the herd animals, big packs of them trying to decide whether they should go into the water hole or not, where the crocodiles are, you watch until they go to 51%, and then something happens and they all go down to the water. So these are not organized, coordinated, pre-planned behaviors following hierarchical structures to accomplish some objective. Even the bees. I mean, we know how the bees do what they do, but it's very much, three or four functions, all they have to do. Nothing like the complexity of functions we have to manage, and the ability to change that over and over and over again, even in the course of a day. So there is a big difference between, it looks like it from the outside, but if you actually watch it, how ants do their thing, and how bees do their thing, and how birds do their things, it's very different than what we do. I mean, they wouldn't organize 200,000 people to go watch a football game.
Or open a Starbucks.
Or open a Starbucks, yeah. They just can't do that. And so that's a distinction. We are the only ones, there's some killer whales are incredibly sophisticated. Each little pod has its own dialect. They communicate over long distances with other pods. They organize group hunts, but it's like 6 killer whales. It's not 1 million killer whales. Thank goodness. So it's just not the same thing. So
Consciousness, yes.
Yeah.
Self-referentiality, no.
Yeah. It's a good question, though. One frequent good question.
Gentlemen, so you're talking about getting the self-referential I out of the way, and yet you still have plenty of thoughts and you're functioning. So are we talking about the mind as a reducing valve, and we're tuning the valve open to receive more from the cosmos?
There's 3 questions there, I think. And
Cheating, yes.
No, it's fine. And Rich has a great answer for the reducing valve. He knows all that literature discussion. As far as thoughts, I mean, if you watch the difference between, I can't believe Mary said that to me. What's the boss? The boss is going to be like, you can feel that feels different from, I need to get to I-85, whatever your I-5, whatever it is. Those feel very different to you. And amazingly, the brain can sort those out. I mean, the brain can recognize the distinction between these highly emotionally charged, volcanic, tornadic thoughts that spin up into enormous problems. It feels different to the brain. It feels different to us, whatever us means, than it does to say, I want a cup of tea. Those are very distinct energies, and the brain, believe it or not, can parse those out. And you need a lot less of these, I want that cup of coffee, than you think you do. We're used to narrating to ourselves, I'm going to go downstairs and get a cup of coffee. You don't need to do that. I mean, without that narrative, you still will walk down the steps and get a cup of coffee. So a lot of that's just habitual. You're so used to doing it emotionally that you just carry it over into all your stuff. But you could really do without a lot of that, and the life still goes on. So there are different classes of thoughts. They function in different networks.